If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The More Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.
Welcome back. My guest now is Dr. Manjir Samanta-Laughton. Now, Manjir trained as a medical doctor, intent on learning about the mechanics of the human body. But her view on the world changed when at the age of 18, she experienced an unexpected spiritual awakening. Since then, she has been on a mission to communicate the truth and the link cutting-edge science with spirituality. She's also turned her theories into text by writing about her beliefs through the books Punk Science and The Genius Groove. Dr. Manjir Samanta, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, just tell me, how does mainstream science mix with your views that you've concluded with?
Gosh, well, mainstream science actually has quite a lot in it that is highly unusual. I don't think the public really know about it. For example, biologists haven't really figured out how life started, how embryos grow into human beings, you know, these basic questions.
Yeah.
Physics is exploring sort of ideas such as higher dimensions, and so a lot of mainstream science is actually quite out there, and you know, there's a lot of things that we haven't concluded completely. So what I'm doing in my work is actually showing how mainstream science itself, and a lot of the references in my book, are actually showing up things that you know, the public may not know that it's actually talking about.
Yeah, exactly. So let's just start with your background a bit here. So how did you sort of get into writing these subjects?
I actually started out as a medical doctor, and as a doctor, obviously, I had patients, and I also, from quite early on in my medical career, had something called a kundalini experience.
Right.
And that sounds rather strange, but it's actually a Sanskrit word for a spiritual awakening. And I went to a yoga class in Freshers Week, as you do, and expecting to be doing lots of exercise.
Yeah.
And instead I got a meditation that was about awakening something called chakras. Never heard of those, you know, at the time. And actually I had this experience that was a total connection with the cosmos itself.
So what was this experience then? What was it telling you?
It wasn't like an experience, like a mental experience. It was like being thrown into total connection with everything at once. It was quite incredible.
Right. But what did it actually, I mean, what was it, what were the fundamental principles of what it gave you?
I think what it gave me is it completely changed my concept of the way the universe is. You know, before I was quite skeptical. I didn't understand that anything to do with spirituality or religion or, you know, I thought it was all superstition.
Yeah.
And so when I had this experience, I went from being a sort of signed up Richard Dawkins fan to somebody who is, you know, realising that there is actually something to it. It's a real tangible way that the universe works.
Okay, so it's looking into how the universe works, and would you, your book obviously mentions consciousness as well. It goes into quite a bit of consciousness, so obviously that was part of your work, was it?
Yes, yeah. I mean, the Hindus, ancient mystics have been talking about for many thousands of years about how consciousness is fundamental to the universe. But so far in science, we've ignored consciousness.
Right.
It's been too sort of wispy and wavery to, you know, to really get sort of concrete science behind it.
Right.
But in the last 40 years, since, you know, the ideas of quantum physics have really started to take hold.
Okay.
Some quantum physicists have been discussing how, well, if quantum physics says, quite weirdly, when it was first discovered, but you know, people found it very strange, including Einstein, that when you look into the atom, the atom behaves differently according to how you look at it, how you measure it. So there's something to do with our perception or our consciousness that interacts with our reality, what we see as solid.
Right. But just very briefly then, your parents were both doctors, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
So how did you, obviously you went to train as a GP.
Yes.
So that must have been, this is all a bit of a change away from where you were sort of originally heading.
Yes.
Yeah. And how did your parents take that change that you went through?
It all happened after I left home. So they saw me as, you know, somebody into the science world. And so, they didn't really know that much about it.
Yeah.
Even though they're Hindus, I don't think they're sort of immersed in it as much, you know.
Yeah.
So there were some times where they were very sceptical and thought I'd kind of lost it.
Because obviously, you know, a GP in a scientific world, it's a
Yes.
little bit different, yeah.
Yes. So, you know, I was leading a double life for a long time.
So, okay then, let's start from a sort of, let's start talking about consciousness now. What is consciousness in your opinion?
Oh gosh, really it's something that can't be explained, and I'd be silly to sit here and say I know what it is.
Yeah.
But I do think it's sort of like the fundamental strata, as it were. It's not a thing,
No.
but it's from which everything comes. Everything that we would call makes up our universe. And you know, at the end of the day, we only know like a small percentage of what the universe is made of. But everything that we sort of see around us actually comes from this, you know, fundamental consciousness. And I make a pun in the book, Inside the Mind of God, because it's Stephen Hawking discusses the mind of God. So, you know, we could call consciousness, this fundamental consciousness, the mind of God. You know?
And is consciousness forever, do you think? Is it, if there is such a thing as forever?
If there is, I think it's infinite as far as we know, you know, and I think infinities keep popping up in physics. And they're often, you know, put aside by fudge factors. But I think ultimately the universe is infinite consciousness. Infinite
consciousness. And is this another word for a way of saying the word God?
Well, it could be, and but everyone shies away from that word. But what I'm trying to do with the book is actually say, well, this isn't so out of keeping with what we know already in science.
No. But, you know, a lot of people have sort of touched on work briefly like yours, but obviously not as in-depth as this book goes. But with the consciousness then, so you're saying that there's consciousness behind the universe.
Yes.
But where did that consciousness come from, though?
Don't know. I mean, ultimately, I guess we all know deep inside us, but I think in the sort of way that we are at the moment, the experience that we're going through, we're not meant to know, because that's not part of our journey. We're meant to be here, you know, go to work, do the things, do the learning that we're supposed to be doing here. Part of us is always that infinite consciousness. But the experience that we're having of being seemingly disconnected with that is the learning that this infinite consciousness is going through.
So, before we came here in this body that we're in now, then, where was our consciousness?
That's a good question. I think there are many dimensions to the universe, and I think you know, science is actually showing this. And you know, as I said, if quantum theory is saying that consciousness is fundamental, well, some quantum physicists, not all, then and then you have the concept of string theory, which says that there's many dimensions to the universe, then it's quite possible then to have many dimensions of consciousness, I believe. And so, you know, I believe that we all of us exist in many dimensions of consciousness. We're currently aware of what we call this dimension, but we're also simultaneously in many other realms. And when we, you know, pass on to the next, you know, dimension, and there are actually studies to show that when people have near-death experiences, when they're completely brain dead, the heart has stopped, they actually report things that are going on in the room, things like surgical equipment, you know, and when they're brought back to life, as it were, they actually report things that they couldn't have known through normal senses.
What are some of these things then?
Well, as I said, surgical equipment and, you know, things that are said and actually transcribed into, you know, surgical notes. And they report seeing, you know, things that as if somebody who is, you know, physically brain dead couldn't possibly know through their eyes, through their hearing. So, you know, we do have this evidence there that consciousness does exist beyond our bodies.
So they're floating above their body, in essence.
A lot of people describe these things, yes.
Yeah, and they're viewing it from afar, and obviously they're viewing situations taking place at that time. And then
yes, yeah, I think you can't sort of generalise that every experience is like that, but there have been reports, quite well known.
Okay, and these studies are evident that in your opinion, that consciousness continues after we
well, the skeptics would say, oh, well, you know, there's some sort of neuronal firing going off and
memories,
that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You know, but when you've actually got, you know, the readout from, you know, the theatre that's actually showing that people are, you know, have no EEG activity, it's a bit difficult to say that.
But what does that mean then for us, that life continues? How does that shape us?
I think, you know,
understanding.
for people who are maybe, you know, have loved ones that are passed on, you know, the idea that, you know, they're not gone, they can be around. I believe that we just move into different dimensions of consciousness and they can be accessed in any realm.
And again, this is obviously where the mediums get their gifts from.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So is that, in your opinion then, a medium that's connecting with someone that's passed on, are they connecting with what you would class as another dimension, or?
Yes, another dimension of consciousness, yes.
Yeah, okay. And is that what some would class as the higher self?
It could be seen as that, and you know, at the moment, I think from my perspective, I don't know all the details about those different dimensions. But certainly with the scientific principles, you know, the universe, as mainstream science says this, the universe is information. Fundamentally information, and some people say fundamentally that information is conscious, and it exists in many dimensions. So you can access that information holographically, and that's another concept from mainstream science. And so which means that every single part has the information of the whole. So when you put that all together, a medium, you know, as I said, consciousness doesn't come from the brain, it actually comes through the brain. So, you know, the medium is actually taking information from these different dimensions through their brain and articulating them.
But can we, you know, access those dimensions in our minds?
I think anybody can. Anybody can, and I think you know, people are quite distracted by TV or whatever, and you know, anybody's got these. You know, even if you are thinking, oh, you know, somebody's going to call me, and they call in the next few minutes. You're thinking about a person, and they call. That is actually accessing something that's non-local, that's not about a sort of physical connection, but it's something that is slightly different.
So would you say you know how to connect with that, or?
I think everybody from that seed, you know, can actually grow with that. I don't believe that there are people that are, you know, completely don't have that experience ever, and that's really the seed of any psychic ability. It's training, like people train how to, you know, play the piano. It's you know, once you actually get the seed of it, and most people have those sorts of experiences, it can be learnt and it can grow within a person.
And is that something you've researched, the psychics, much? Or?
There are people who have researched psychics. People like Professor Gary Schwartz at the University of Arizona did a lot of control studies with psychics, and you know, under control conditions would test their readings, and you know, only even take the best scores. And then he found that they were definitely statistically significant.
Right, okay. So there's so much to learn yet, isn't there?
Yes.
And again, you've covered it in more books, which we'll come back just after the break and discuss some of those books. So, okay, we're going to take a short break there, and stay tuned, and we'll be back with our guest, Manjir Samanta-Laughton, and talk about her beliefs about the connection between science and spirituality.
Visit themoreshow.co.uk/shop to purchase products and services from your favourite past guests. If you're new to this site, you can also catch up on the previous television and radio shows through YouTube and the More Show website.
Dr. Manjir, welcome back to the show. One of the subjects I wanted to talk about just before the break there was, you know, this whole idea of how, we talked about the mediums, but this whole idea of the ghosts and the other dimensions. So what can you tell us about ghosts?
Well, it's an idea that, again, from string theory, this concept of hyperspace in many dimensions, even string theorist Michio Kaku talks about it in his book, that this could be where ghosts reside. You know, ghostly apparitions have occurred in every single culture of humanity and every single era. From a scientific perspective, you've got to wonder, something might be going on there.
Yeah, what is going on there? Yeah. I mean, are people just seeing them because, you know, it's something they want to see, or is there a scientific solution to it?
Well, you'd think that people would take it seriously, because something that is, you know, occurring in, no matter what the culture or era, you know, there's got to be something behind it. So I believe that with ghosts, if you look into often if the life of that person is identified, there's something highly traumatic about it. And I believe that, you know, the forces that are controlling that person, you know, that we're all made up of as well, are particularly, you might call, heavy. and attracted to this plane and can't leave this plane, as it were. So they're in a different dimension, but because of the emotions of their life, it's actually closest to this dimension. So it's almost like, the emotions are keeping them trapped here.
Yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts on then of things like exorcism? I mean, and how that works?
Gosh, well, often exorcism works by, healing the emotions of that person, and some spirits actually don't know that they're actually gone. So I think what can happen is a sort of particle antimatter-matter annihilation, to give a sort of technical, you're bringing together two charged particles, one positive, one negative, and you're moving them into light. The people often say move to the light. But first of all, you've got to get that spirit to recognise that they're dead, and also to let go of whatever it is they're holding on to.
I mean, you'd have thought they would know they're dead, but the thing is,
often
there's been good films that have sort of documented that procedure, haven't they? Well, they don't know they've moved on, I mean, obviously, it's difficult to explain, isn't it? It's difficult to even comprehend. But I suppose you have to think outside the box a little bit.
Yeah.
But is that the same with this sort of UFO encounters? I mean...
Yeah, another topic that if you look at, UFO encounters have actually been happening, you could argue, throughout history. A lot of the things, say in the Book of Enoch, which is one of the texts that was taken out of the Old Testament of the Bible, very interesting descriptions of beings that appeared with shining faces and beside Enoch's bed, and he was taken up to, and he describes all these different heavens. Now, all these different heavens, the different dimensions, same sort of concepts, different language, because it was a different era. But again, UFO encounters, if we were to take some of these old descriptions and look at them again, we can see that they match up to modern descriptions. So it's not just about something in our era. And again, these, I believe that there's, these are different dimensional beings, not coming from different planets, but different dimensions. And some of the things that you see in UFO encounters, such as the bright orange colour, maybe even Moses' burning bush, was this sort of bright, the same sort of principle, who knows? But the bright orange colour, it's sort of a peachy colour that people associate with you, could be part of the process of coming down through the dimensions into our dimension, could be producing this sort of colour.
But how do we get our heads around what another dimension could look like? I mean, if these beings are coming in a sort of solid form, I mean, what's that say about the dimension they're coming from?
Well, it's kind of analogous to if we were to look at somebody who lived in flatland. For us, we are this, to a person in flatland, we're an omnipresent being, We can see into them, we can flip them around if we want, and we seem to be everywhere to somebody that's a two-dimensional being. They can't conceive of what three dimensions are like. And if we were to pick them up and move them into three dimensions, they'd see all sorts of strange colours and strange forms and strange lights. And it's like with us, if people in our dimension have a higher dimensional experience and then go tell their friends, well, they'd think they're a bit, lost it, had something funny for dinner.
Yeah. I mean, do you think science will ever prove that there's these multi-dimensions? I mean, and that these, this whole UFO subject, there's much more to it than just the skepticism.
Well, I think times are changing, and I do believe we're actually going through an upswing in consciousness, actually. I think consciousness doesn't stay static.
Yeah.
And as that's happening, you get more and more people who are, who this becomes self-evident or obvious to them, and people are having more sort of multi-dimensional experience. It's hard to actually put numbers on it, but it does seem to be rising.
Right,
so as that happens, I think, the science that we have now is going to just move on. We do have the explanations already.
Yeah.
It's just that, making that mainstream.
Yeah.
I'm making the analogies.
You are, and it's a great book with the analogies in there. But just so we don't upset the UFO community, I mean, these could be coming from our own solar system as well. I mean, have you looked into that, or?
Again, I think it's really, because I am somebody who is sort of, has multidimensional awareness, occasionally I've actually seen different frequencies of dimensions, and I've seen beings in several of them. So, it's not just about solar systems, it's about, actual the different frequencies. I think I think because I do experience it, I can actually...
And do you think it's because you're open to up to the subject, you're open to the whole possibilities?
Yes, but again, the book is not about me. I want to show from the perspective of my experience that the science actually does show this.
Absolutely. So let's just move on and talk about your book, Genius Groove On. So sorry, Genius Groove.
I'll get you groove on, whichever way.
Let's just reread it. So tell me about your book, Genius Groove.
Well, it's moving forward from that concept that we are that everything in the universe is consciousness and information. Actually, we can all tap into it.
Right.
So this is a really practical application of the sort of science that I'm talking about. People think of genius as people who have sort of high IQs, or what I wanted to show is that it's not about genetics. It's not about what you're born with, because that type of science, even in biology, mainstream biology, is starting to go by the wayside. The concept of IQ is not actually very scientific. Genius, intelligence is fluid, and what the genius groove is your own unique expression and your own unique connection to the universe. And that's when you're really in your creativity, when you're in your genius groove, and you're actually tapping into the information that's out there, bringing it through yourself and expressing it, so you are coming to meet the universal consciousness.
Right. What about some of these authors that talk about that we're here to learn emotions? How does the emotional aspect fit into your work?
Oh, that's absolutely key. I do think that we are here to, learn an emotional journey. When people say, "Oh, I'm having a hard time," it's not about judging that hard time, but seeing, well, that is actually part of your learning and part of your growth. So,
so is the consciousness then that what we come from? What is it trying to learn certain lessons then? Is that what this points to?
I think you've got it in one. Yeah, I think the universal consciousness. It's almost like playing a game. It's playing a game of disguise, saying, "I wonder what would happen." Maybe it's because it's bored or something. I don't know.
It's got nothing to do on Saturday. I don't know.
It's sort of coming down and taking lots of different forms, and going, "I wonder what it'd be like to pretend I don't know who I am." And sort of through our lives
So you're saying there that this consciousness that we come from blanks itself of any memories, comes into what we are now to have an experience. Is that what you're...
I think so. I think the memories are there to be accessed if that's what's right for that particular lifetime. Right. But it's almost like a game,
a game, okay. And for this particular lifetime, when you refer to that, you're saying that the experience it's having right now is whatever it's trying to get out of this particular life, whatever lessons it's going through.
Yes.
Like you said, the hard times and the emotions is to sort of
the gift is a learner.
Yeah, the gift is a learner. And I suppose we're all learning different lessons, aren't we?
We're all learning different lessons, and they're all perfect. I know when you're in the middle of a hard time, it's like, oh, this isn't perfect, this doesn't feel good. But actually, we've all had those aha moments when you look back and think, well, if that hadn't happened, then I wouldn't have led to, if I hadn't got that divorce or something, it wouldn't have led to a new job, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. And again, that's an emotional roller coaster in a sense as well, which links into your work. So, okay, let's just briefly move on and talk about black holes as well, because that's one subject where this all sort of connects in a sense, doesn't it? So, how does it connect, and how
Gosh, I didn't realise that I'd be writing about black holes when I started out as a doctor. But I mean, black holes, obviously, a lot of people think of them as these fearsome things that gobble everything up, and they take in everything, including light. But when I started writing this book, I didn't realise that, I knew there was something I was missing, but I didn't know what it was. And one day in 2003, it sort of all came to me, and I realised that actually black holes are not guzzling monsters. They're actually in the realms that are beyond the speed of light, and they're actually super bright, and they're actually the source of infinite light, this infinite consciousness that we're talking about. It actually comes from black holes into our dimension. So they're actually the creative points of the universe, and it's not just black holes that are in the centre of every galaxy. which is what we found in our telescopes, they're actually black holes, are sort of like a fractal, it's going throughout the universe. Black holes are at every single level.
So they're a conduit in a sense, are they?
A conduit, absolutely.
Yeah. But would mainstream science agree with that? Or?
Well, there's an amazing turnaround happened in the last few years. Since I published first in 2003, there's so much data come from our telescopes to show that black holes actually give off sort of lots of radiation, sometimes at the speed of light. The reason why it's at the speed of light is it's only just come to our dimension, and we can see it for the first time. Beyond the speed of light, it appears black. Below the speed of light, we can see it coming. So we see radiation coming to us at the speed of light. Yeah. And so we're seeing all these amazing things. And it got to 2009, sorry. And, maybe it's 2010. Yeah. And they actually said, made a big announcement that black holes are creating galaxies. They did a final announcement in the mainstream. And I predicted this back in 2003. And there's actually a lot of predictions that I made in the book that I published in Punk Science in 2006 that actually now have come true, which is quite an amazing thing to happen. So when you have a theory that is a good theory, it should actually make predictions that come true. So everything from the sun, solar flares, to comets, to atoms, to quarks, they all show similar patterns.
And you must have a website.
Yeah, I do. You can go to, if it's easier to remember, punkscience.com or paradigmrevolution.com. It's all the same website now, so do have a look. It's got my blog and any events.
Well, we'll put a link on our website from that. And so, Dr. Manjir, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
If you want to find out more about our guest on today's show, visit my website, themoreshow.co.uk, and click on past guests, and there you'll be able to find out more. And also you can join our Facebook group to get the latest updates on the show. So until next time, thanks for watching.
If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The More Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.